Hi class, welcome to the Analysis tab of Major Assignment 3 for Math 144. On the Analysis tab, please make sure you start by entering your name under Part 2 in that blue cell. Your name must be at least 5 letters long. If your name is not 5 letters long, please fill in X's after your name until you have reached at least 5 letters. Once you have entered your name in, you will see your scores before tutoring and after tutoring generate in the gray cells. So what you're assuming is that you had these students take a test, they received tutoring, and then they took a test again, and you've recorded the scores before the tutoring and you've recorded the scores after the tutoring. Throughout this entire assignment, we are going to examine the difference in scores. So the very first thing you need to do is you need to find the difference in the scores after tutoring and the scores before tutoring. Make sure you follow after minus before. The directions tell you in 3A, take the after score minus the before score. So in this entire column D, take each of those after tutoring scores minus the before tutoring using Excel formula with cell references. Once you have found those difference in scores, you can continue on to the rest of Part 3A and the following parts. For the rest of Part 3A, you are going to be finding the mean, median, standard deviation, and range for the scores before tutoring, after tutoring, and difference in scores. So you're going to be doing the same calculation 3 different times, 3 different sets of data. When you do these calculations, you need to make sure you use the appropriate statistical Excel function. So for example, for the mean, you'd want to use the average function and then select the data you're taking the average of. Use the appropriate statistics function. Make sure you highlight the appropriate data for each of these cells in this table. For the first column of the table, you are only looking at the scores before tutoring. So you're looking at the scores in column B. For the second column of the table, you're looking at the scores after tutoring. And then for the third column, you are looking at the difference in scores. And again, you're finding the mean, median, standard deviation, and range. You should be using Excel functions in each of those formulas. For Part 4, you're only going to look at the difference in scores. In Part 4, you are going to find 2 different percentiles. The percentiles are going to be given to you, and you are going to calculate those percentiles for the difference in scores. So when you do this, make sure you are using the Excel function for percentiles. You are going to use the difference in scores in column D as your data. You will make sure you cell reference the data in column D, the difference in scores, and you will not cell reference your percentages. You will manually type in those percentages into the function. And again, for each of those, you should be using your percentile Excel function to do your calculations. And only do the calculations based on the differences in scores. For Part 5A, you are again only looking at the differences in scores. For Part 5A, you are going to be following the empirical rule. So you are going to be calculating the percentage. For Part 5A, you're going to be calculating the upper and lower limits for the given percentage. So for my example here, I'm given 68% of the data. So I want to use the empirical rule, and I want to determine the boundaries for where 68% of my data falls in between. This is where you want to use the mean and the standard deviation. The mean and the standard deviation are going to be taken from Part 3A, and you're only looking at the difference in scores. So you will use your mean and standard deviation from Part 3A, and then you're going to follow the empirical rule to find the lower and upper limits for the given percentage. Again, make sure you look to see what percentage you're given and follow the appropriate formulas with those percentages and cell reference the mean and standard deviation into your formula. And then for Part 5B, you're going to answer a question based off of the values you found in Part 5A. So Part 5B, make sure you answer it based on what you get in Part 5A. Make sure you follow any special instructions provided by your instructor. See here, justify your answer using the lower and upper limits found in Part 5A. Make sure you use complete grammar, complete sentences, and follow any minimum word counts if provided by your instructor. So this finishes the first tab of the analysis, and I'll make a separate tab for the visualization.